In India, we are a peninsular nation, but somehow the word peninsula has escaped the mind space of so many. And I think that's a deep tragedy. We don't love our oceans as much as we should.
And then he goes on with Soma to found the first Hindu kingdom in Southeast Asia called Funan, which later on evolved in Vietnam into the Chams and on the Cambodian side into the Angkor and the Khmer empires. To the Honorable Prime Minister, usually he expects me to take the last 5 minutes to present some mad idea to him. So on one of those occasions, I presented him a 5-slide presentation of the design of this ship. So he looked at me and then says, Karo. Then he said he'll also give me a piece of advice. Dubna mat. So the anchor we will use in this is actually little ahistorical, I agree, but nevertheless, it'll be a Harappan period anchor.
Our next session is about a very interesting project that was taken up by the Ministry of Culture, the Indian Navy, and documented by Sangam Talks. It is the making of, hold your breath, a ship that is stitched together with wooden planks and coconut fibers. So this project was dreamt of by Sanjeev Sanyal, who thought that it can be put into action. The Navy pitched in, and then there was Hodi Constructions, who constructed the entire ship in their docks. Now the ship is almost ready to sail. The Indian Navy is training on it, and we are documenting it. We are immensely proud to be a part of this national level project. So this session is going to begin with a show reel of INSV Kaundinya.
This is the story of an ancient, stitched ship, born from India's daring legacy and unmatched craftsmanship. Built without nails, without the need for a propeller, yet it cuts through the waves, forging ahead with pride. This ship, inspired by a 5th century, born from the ancient artistry of the Ajanta caves, revives a 5th century vision of maritime history.
Different designs were done at different points in time. So this design is actually based on a painting in Ajanta. The fact that the technology that was used to build these ancient ships was a very peculiar one. They didn't nail their ships together for the most part. There were the occasional nailed ships, but the dominant technology was of stitching these ships together. The planks were taken and they were stitched together. So I made this idea to many people, including the Honorable Prime Minister, and so they supported me, funding from the Ministry of Culture and the support of the Indian Navy.
On a ship that has been constructed purely on stitching. We build ships using the modern welding. So we are going back in the time and trying to recreate that exact technique of shipbuilding that has been used. So it's an experimental project in itself.
You have here, already you can see the keel. Now, To understand what the keel is, this is the, you can think of it as the backbone of the ship. And this is, in some ways, has to be the strongest part, and that has already been laid out. It goes all the way. Remember, the ship is going to be 21 meters long, so this keel has been laid in accordance to that.
We said, do you have any reference drawings? So they said yes, and they pulled out a sheet of paper and it showed a picture of a boat from Ajanta caves. So I said, where is the design? He said, this is the design. Can you build it?
Here the planks that we are using are called Anjali in Malayalam, otherwise in English it is the wild jackwood. So this wood needs to be bent to suit the shape of the ship. The way we achieve that is, the plank is first clamped and then you pour hot water on that. Since the bottom planks does not require more curvature, we go with the boiling water. So that is poured over a period of 2-3 days and then hammered, and that shape is got.
It is a much bigger challenge than building Mahadevi and Tarini.
We had to procure the right kind of wood. We need a salt baked coir. So if you taste the coir that we are using in the boat, it is baked in salt, it is cured, and then the ropes are made, so that adds strength. So there are very small tidbits that you need to keep in mind while procuring the raw material. We are procuring natural materials like khundrus, which is a resin that they are using between the planks.
Foundation 2 പീസാണ്. 2 പീസാണ്. അത് ജോയിൻറ്റ് ചെയ്യണം. ആദ്യം നമ്മൾ അതിൻ്റെ ലെവൽ കണക്കാക്കി ജോയിൻ്റ് ആക്കും. എന്നിട്ട് നമ്മൾ കട്ടേൻ്റെ മുകളിൽ സീറ്റിംഗ് ആയിട്ട് ഇങ്ങനെ കട്ട വെക്കും. കട്ട മുകളിൽ ആ ഫൗണ്ടേഷൻ ഇങ്ങനെ വെക്കും.
easy नहीं है, easy का काम नहीं है, hard work है.
The design is also being tested at IIT Madras. They are going to do experiments and validate it.
We want to know how the ship is going to behave. The model C conditions are specified in terms of significant wave height and time period. Accordingly, we create it in our wave basin and do the test and measure all the motions and the forces which are acting particularly on the mast in the x direction. These are the tests. It amounts to around 200 to 250 tests we are going to do for this model.
Project is once in a lifetime project. I'm really excited about doing this. In my career, I have never done such a project before.
There have been a lot of challenges that we've had to face since the construction of the ship. One of the particular challenges, bending the planks in the shape that is desired. The rains in Goa have been quite crazy this year. We've had to construct a shelter around the stitch boat to ensure that our construction isn't hampered.
Today, on this historic day, the launch of the stitched ship, a remarkable project envisioned by the Government of India.
So to talk further on the making of the stitch ship, the idea, the conception of the idea and its execution, I'll invite Vishnu and Sanjeev Sanyal to the stage.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to be over here. I've known Sanjeev for a long time, and in as much as we identify him as an economist, it's a mutual interest in India's maritime heritage, which really sort of brought us, in a sense, connected on a theme which we both believe is underreported, underspoken about. While Sanjeev focuses so much on the history of India's maritime traditions, I focused on the modern Indian Navy. It's interesting, tomorrow I'm going to be in Visakhapatnam, looking at just a few days ahead of the commissioning of 2 Indian Navy frigates of the Project 17A class. The fact that we can build frigates in the Indian Navy at this pace to commission 2 on one day is actually something which we couldn't do even a few years back. But Sanjeev's interest is not just on the modern Indian Navy and modern shipbuilding, not just military but also civilian. In India, we are a peninsular nation, but somehow the word peninsular has escaped the mind space of so many. And I think that's a deep tragedy. We don't love our oceans as much as we should. We don't love our maritime culture, our history as much as we should. We only have passing references of this in school texts and in college texts about the profound historical, cultural, economic links which have existed for so long. But I believe INSV Kaundinya is a labor of love, which goes a long way in actually telling us that story. And I said a labor of love because there's a love story. So why don't we start this with the love story of Kaundinya himself?
Yeah, so just so that you know, this ship is named after Kaundinya, who is the oldest known mariner, Indian mariner of whom we know by name. Now, we don't have the exact date, but somewhere 2000 odd years ago, there was an Indian mariner called Kaundinya sailing past the Mekong Delta. And what happens is that he's attacked by pirates. So there are pirates at that time as well. And they attack his ship, and Kaundinya is a brave young man. He takes his crew and they fight the pirates off. But he has a problem. His problem is that his ship is leaking after this battle. So he takes his ship and beaches it somewhere on the Mekong Delta, and they begin to fix it. So while they're fixing it, they get completely surrounded by a local Naga tribe, a serpent tribe. Now, things are quite desperate because there are maybe 20, 25 of them, some small number of crew, and there's a whole tribe surrounding them. Nevertheless, Kaundinya is a brave lad, so he gets his sailors together. They prepare to defend themselves, but things are looking pretty dire. Then luck suddenly turns in his favor. It turns out that the leader of the Naga tribe is a warrior princess called Soma. And Soma sees Kaundinya and falls in love. Evidently, he was quite a handsome dude. And so she proposes marriage. Now, I'm assuming that Kaundinya at this point didn't have too much choice in the matter. But nevertheless, he did accept it. And then he goes on with Soma to found the first Hindu kingdom in Southeast Asia called Funan, which later on evolved in Vietnam into the Chams, and on the Cambodian side into the Angkor and the Khmer empires. So the purpose when I decided to build this ship was, what name do you give it? So many suggestions came. So I thought it would be appropriate to name it after the first great Indian mariner who we know of by name.
The design you came across, was it a painting in Ajanta or the remains of a painting of a design in Ajanta? What was the design specifically of? And because over a period of centuries, there would be different classes of ships.
Absolutely. So, when I wrote Ocean of Churn, one of the things that keeps coming up through all the literature, and I mention it in the book, is that the Indians were obviously sailing very far distances. So Indian was sailing to Korea, they are sailing up the Red Sea and all over the Indian Ocean. So they were using designs which obviously changed, but there was something that kept occurring quite often, is that both the Indians and, more importantly, foreigners who came into the Indian Ocean region mentioned that the Indian ships are always stitched together. They don't use nails. It's not because they don't know how to create nails. We, in fact, knew about rust-free nails. We know that from Airoli iron pillar, that we actually had the technology of rust-free nails. But for some reason, we did not nail them together for the most part. The odd one we did, but mostly stitched together. So the question then arose, what did these ships look like? So I began to look for material, and I found some evidence of what they may have looked like. So the very earliest ships or watercraft that we know of are actually Harappan. And we know the Harappans did cross the oceans and go to Oman and so on. But the ships of which depictions we have are actually riverboats. So those can't be it. So then I dug further, and eventually I found a Satavahana period boat or ship in a coin. So that was the earliest one I saw, which, by the way, does look slightly like this. And it was there on the screen, Isabel, earlier. But it's not clear enough. It's basically like a scratch on a coin. So a better depiction was a painting, which I was also shown in Ajanta, which is basically from the Gupta period, which shows a clearer boat with 3 masts, a foresail, and person, a sailor. Now, it's obviously a artistic depiction, but again, it gives you some sense of this. And then I found a couple of texts, one of them being the Yukti Kalpataru, put together by Raja Bhoj. So like this, I got pieces of information. Then there is the odd sculpture here and there. So triangulating all this information, I began to get a picture of what this ship may have looked like. Now the problem is that this shipbuilding technology basically lasted till about the little bit after the Europeans turned up. The reason we eventually abandoned it is not because it's an inefficient technology for crossing the seas necessarily, but because these ships cannot load cannons. You see, if you fire a cannon, forget the other guy's cannon, your own cannon blowback will cause the stitching to get loose after a few shots. So you'll begin leaking. So eventually the Indians also adopted the Western type of shipbuilding frame system, which is what the Maratha Navy was. By the way, the Maratha Navy is not built with ships. They use the Western derived designs. So the problem is, who will then build this ship? It turns out, however, although large ships are no longer built using this technique, there are now still a few villages along the coastline where very small boats, like maybe the size of the stage, are built for coastal shipping, which local artisans still remember. So they haven't built a big ship, but there are at least some people who remember this. So in the course of this, I found this person who talked about Babu Sankaran, who had not only been taught how to do the stitching, he had been taught the rules of thumb for a larger ship by when he was young. Now this was very useful because he is basically the only person who knows, at least in theory, how to build a big ship. And he had also worked on a Nomani project for a reconstruction of a later period dhow. So he basically fitted what we wanted. And I said, look, we have to use him because after him, even his own kids don't want to remember this. So there was a certain sense of urgency towards trying and using all this knowledge to try and build a ship while we could do it.
It's authentic. Even the bathroom is authentic.
Yes, this is a bit of a basket hanging out the back.
You haven't been very kind to yourself, have you? Presuming you're going to be sailing on it.
So there is nothing, there are many things on it which are archaic. First of all, it does not have a rudder because a rudder didn't exist at that time. It uses a trailing oar. So it'll have a steering oar hanging out of the back. That's the piece that is there in the model. It has square sails. As you can see, these sails are square. In the model, they're a bit smaller than the real ones. They're a bit bigger. But basically, square sails. Now, why square sails is important? Because you see, modern sailing ships use a lantern sail by which you can shift it from side to side, which allows you to tack against the wind. This can only sail with the wind, so i.e. the direction in which the wind is going is the only direction you can go. So no steering wheel, no rudder, only a steering oar, and you have square sails. Then the hull itself, the hull is flexible because it's stitched. And so when it hits a very big wave, the hull actually caves in a little bit. Just a little bit, but it does. Now, all of this combined has sailing characteristics which no living person knows how to deal with. And of course, there is no air conditioning and no modern toilets and all this kind of thing. Though we have kept some spare things for various things, but by and large, we have stuck to the original design.
No, but so then you went to IIT because you had to see if it's safe and if it sails.
Yes, so, well, there were 2 stages of going to IIT. The first stage had to basically learn naval architecture and flow dynamics and all of that. And I have my friend Hemant sitting in the audience. He's from the Navy who helped me with this. And I learned enough of it. And I said, let me see if I can go to the Naval Department of IIT Delhi and be able to give a presentation on flow dynamics to the guys who actually do this for a living. And so I made the presentation. As I said, I did it with Hemant's help. And after the presentation, much of the audience thought that I had studied engineering. So I said, okay, I have understood enough of this that I can fake it. So now the next step comes that you build a model and take it to IIT Madras now, because they have a tow tank, as you saw that in the video as well. And then we tested it. So once we had tested it, we had some idea, then we used whatever knowledge we could get from Hodi and from Babu Sankaran, and we created this line drawing which we began to build. But remember, after doing all of this, we do not know if this thing will properly sail. So this thing has been built, and there's some photos at the back which may have flipped over to show the finished product. But because the monsoons came as soon as we had just finished it, so we have actually not sailed it yet. And we had to then put it in the submarine pen in Karwar, at the naval base, to wait out the monsoon. So as soon as the monsoon finishes, which will hopefully happen in a month's time, we will drag it out, and then we will attempt to actually sail it.
Who's going to sail it?
So for sailing it, the Navy has been very kind. They have provided crew of 15 of India's best sailors. So the crew now consists of a captain, a naval architect, which is Hemant, 15 of India's best sailors, and one random economist.
And one journalist as well.
If you can come along. We have warned you about the toilet, though. Acha, then what happens is, after we put this in water, we will initially just take it, tug it out to something distant. Because remember, before we even attempt to do anything, we have to at least learn how to turn it and steer it. And we have no idea how this will work. So we will tug it out reasonably far out to sea so that it can't hit rocks or something. And then we will do some basic maneuvering with it. For example, how do you turn it? The usual way we use is tacking. This cannot tack. So how on earth do you turn a ship like this? We don't know. So once we have got the hang of this by learning it and doing it over and over again, by hopefully December, we will be able to say that we know how to sail it.
What were ships like this used for?
So ships like this were primarily obviously used for trading. An important thing you got to realize that, except in the very, very early stage, Indian mercantile power in the Indian Ocean was not driven by some individual heroic merchant going out and sailing around on his own. This was a very organized business with merchant guilds. So these were like corporations. They were sailing in large numbers, thousands of ships, in fact. They had their own navy. They would sail out in fleets and basically trade all the way through with the Romans on one side and with the Chinese and Koreans on the other side. And as I said, they were usually used for mercantile activities, but they would also have the capability of doing naval activities. So some of these ships were convertible, but they also had specialized naval ships. Now, specialized naval ships are very interesting because they tend to have a row of rowing galleys. The reason you need that is that in a battle, you need to be able to maneuver in directions where the wind will not take you. Remember, as I said, this is before you could sail at an angle to the wind. So if you wanted to go at an angle or do something or go faster or slower, you can't rely on the wind. So for short distances during the battle, they had to be able to row it. So they would have a bank of oars as well. So the combination of that were also used for battleships as well.
When you went to the Ministry of Culture, the Indian Navy, and at one level the Prime Minister and said, "Sir, I have a proposal," they said yes, they would have looked at you and said, he's come with some economics, some crunching numbers of India's GDP growth. And then you said, "I want to build a ship." Did they have their hands on their heads thinking, what is he about?
So the good news is that the members of the government are used to me coming up with such mad plans. This is not the only one. There are a few more in the pipeline, including attempting to create a few 100 kilometers of cycling paths in Delhi using the Yamuna floodplains. So I keep doing these kinds of things. Some of them are in pipeline. So the way it worked is, once I had an idea of what the ship would look like, when I make a presentation to the Honorable Prime Minister, usually he expects me to take the last 5 minutes to present some mad idea to him. So on one of those occasions, I presented him a 5-slide presentation of the design of this ship. So he looked at me and then says, "Karo." Then he said he'll also give me a piece of advice. "Doobna mat." So with that piece of advice, I then said, okay, so how do I get money? At least I've got a blessing. So I then went to the Ministry of Culture, where both the Minister of Culture, who you met in the morning today, Gajendraji, and the then Secretary Culture, Govind Mohan, they said, okay, this sounds like a mad enough idea that we should attempt. And there is a scheme called the Mausam scheme, where they have been trying to do various things on celebrating India's maritime past, and they were wondering what to do. So here was one good project for them. So they said, okay, we'll fund it, but we have no idea how to build the ship. So then I obviously took this to the Navy. So the good news was that 3 Navy chiefs thought this was a good news. So Admiral K.B. Singh, then Habari Kumar, and the present Dinesh Ji, all 3 of them thought it was a very good idea. So they have been very, very supportive. And so with the help of the Navy, the Culture Ministry, and of course I needed help from other people also, Shipping Ministry. They had to waive all their safety regulations for it. Because remember, this ship shouldn't be in the water if I went strictly by the law. So I had to get all kinds of special okays from them to allow this to happen. And of course, at the end of it, I'm going to sail it to other countries. So I will need the support of external affairs as well.
So one final question on this. There were Harappan edicts which also influenced, your thinking about the ship, or tell us a little bit about that. You saw oar designs, or was it?
No. So you see, this is a ship from the Gupta period, 4th, 5th century AD, roughly speaking. I've taken elements from a little bit before, a little bit after. But when you're saying Harappan, then you're going 2,500 years earlier. Completely different universe. Now, as I said, I don't know what those ships look like. And very often, historians who are not used to naval design and things like that, they will put up a ship of a photo or a depiction of a riverboat and say, they went to Oman in this. Now, anybody who knows anything about naval design will laugh at it, because the design elements are totally different. So we actually don't know what the Harappan ships look like at all. But interestingly, we know what their anchors look like. You see, the ships were made from wood, so it's all rotted away. But their anchors, we know because they were made from stone. And there are many sites along the coast. For example, in Dwarka, near Dwarka, there's a place called Bet Dwarka, where these anchors have been found. They're actually triangular pieces of rock about this big, and there are 3 holes in them. The top hole is for getting the rope through, but the bottom 2 holes is interesting. Initially, we didn't have any idea what they were using it for, till Hemant figured out that what they did is they had wooden stakes through them. And what happens with those wooden stakes is that those are like when you need basically spikes which get lodged in the ground or rock or whatever, and then the ship gets caught in it. So I said, okay, this is the earliest thing we know about maritime design, any maritime Indian technology. And since we are not sure while I have a depiction of the Gupta period ship, I do not have a depiction of a Gupta period anchor. So I said, okay, I'll go be a little bit ahistorical and go for the oldest anchor. So the anchor we will use in this is actually little ahistorical, I agree, but nevertheless, it'll be a Harappan period anchor.
Well, look, this is absolutely riveting. It's fascinating. We are completely up on time in this session. We could keep talking forever. But I think your passion in everything that you do sort of stems through in this project. This is perhaps your biggest project in a sense. And we wish you all the very best, in reviving a sense of our past, our maritime history and culture, and all the very best for this unbelievable project and this beautiful ship.
Thank you so much.